Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when we think of Moses, we immediately picture this towering, larger-than-life figure of history. We think of the liberator, the lawgiver, the guy who stood barefoot before the burning bush and literally split the sea. But here's the thing. Moses absolutely did not emerge from Mount Sinai as a fully formed leader. Today, we're uncovering the untold human story behind this mythic figure, focusing heavily on the ordinary, hidden foundation that made his extraordinary life even possible. Okay, let's dive into this, because the primary instrument of Moses' formation wasn't just divine visions. It was actually a family. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 tells us, "Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro." Think about how sharply that contrasts with the famous, legendary figure we all know so well. Way before he was speaking with God face to face, Moses was just a guy out there keeping sheep in the desert. It's a profoundly grounded, ancient text. It reminds us that long, long before he ever led a nation, he had to learn how to simply live in a household. Section 1. The Forgotten Family. 40. Now, this number is absolutely massive in this context. Between his desperate flight from Egypt as a prince and his dramatic return as a prophet, Moses spent 40 incredibly quiet years being formed in the wilderness of Midian. Yes, his palace education back in Egypt gave him confidence and intellect for sure, but the wilderness? The wilderness gave him patience, humility, and a deeply intimate knowledge of the desert terrain. And he didn't just learn those things in a vacuum all by himself. He spent 4 decades being shaped by a Midianite family before he ever stepped up to lead a nation. Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds. Jethro, the unexpected mentor.
So Jethro is a Midianite priest, right? But he's also known as Reuel, which translates to friend of God. And in some other places, he's called Hobab. Now, this creates a fascinating theological puzzle. Scholars have debated for literal centuries if these are different source documents, maybe clan names versus personal names, or even if one refers to a brother-in-law. But honestly, regardless of how you solve the puzzle, his consistent presence from all these multiple angles proves one crucial thing. He was simply too important for the tradition to leave out. The very fact that they couldn't even agree on what to call him is, paradoxically, a perfect tribute to his massive importance.
This brings us to a really profound recognition scene that happens right after the Exodus. Jethro visits Moses and flat out declares, "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods." This is a stunning moment in the text. You have a non-Israelite Midianite priest who offers a burnt offering to the God of Israel, and then he actually sits down to eat covenant bread with Aaron and the elders of Israel. He recognizes the divine rescue, and he's welcomed into the most intimate social fellowship of the ancient world, completely bypassing all ethnic boundaries. It's an incredible moment of inclusion. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is where these qualifications actually come from. Jethro looks at how Moses is running things, basically exhausting himself judging disputes all day long, and he suggests a totally new system. He tells Moses, look for capable individuals who fear God, who have trustworthy character, and who absolutely hate unjust gain. These ancient organizational requirements for leaders, they actually came from completely outside the covenant community. Wisdom, it turns out, is definitely not the exclusive property of the chosen people. So Jethro helps create this beautifully structured governance model. First, he diagnoses the leader's burnout and inefficiency, which is a problem we are all very, very familiar with today. Then, he tells Moses to appoint qualified men, divide the people hierarchically into thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and just delegate all those minor cases downward. This outsider essentially invented Israel's civil justice system. And the best part? Moses listened. It's actually the only recorded instance in the entire Mosaic narrative of Moses accepting direct governance counsel from a human being without needing to get a divine oracle first. Organizational wisdom is beautifully embedded in the created order, and Jethro saw it clearly. Section 3. Zipporah saves the mission. Okay, we are heading into what is easily the most suspenseful and difficult climax of our explainer, the dark road back to Egypt. Let's start by deconstructing her name. Zipporah, or Zipporah in Hebrew, translates to bird. It's an incredibly evocative name. It suggests lightness, swift movement, and the distinct quality of someone who is not easily caught or held down. And as we're about to see, her swift, deeply decisive nature perfectly aligns with the intense, frankly shocking actions she's about to take on this journey. I want you to pause for a second and ponder a true enigma here. Why on earth did God attack Moses on the road to Egypt? It is one of the most difficult, head-scratching passages in the entire text. God had just commissioned Moses at the burning bush to liberate Israel, right? But on the journey back, at a lodging place, a severe divine threat comes against Moses' life. The answer points back to a massive covenantal failure. Moses had somehow neglected to circumcise one of his sons. Think about that. The man about to lead the covenant nation literally could not do so while maintaining an uncircumcised household. The massive commission and his personal negligence were just completely incompatible.
So the crucial point is what happens next. Without waiting for any divine instruction, without pausing to consult anyone, Zipporah just acts. She takes a flint knife, circumcises her son, touches the blood to Moses, and boldly declares him a breadcrumb of blood. She single-handedly paid the bloody, intimate cost of Moses' negligence. A woman from entirely outside the covenant community maintained the covenant's strict requirement when the covenant's own representative had completely failed. Zipporah decisively saved Moses' life that night, and in doing so, she preserved the entire Exodus mission.
But if we trace her heartbreaking biographical timeline, it's a tough story. We see the romantic encounter at the well early on, and of course, her decisive, bloody act at the roadside inn. But consider Exodus year 1. The text explicitly mentions that Moses sent her away. During the epic confrontation with Pharaoh, the plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, literally the most triumphant national moments of her husband's life, Zipporah was sidelined back in Midian. She was only reunited with him quietly a whole year later in the wilderness, after which she virtually disappears from the narrative altogether. She just receded behind the vastness of the national story her husband was carrying.
Section 4. The Sons of Exile.
Moses' 2 sons carry names that are, for all intents and purposes, theological confessions. Look at this stark contrast. Gershom, which means a sojourner there, encodes all the human pain and the harsh reality of a father's displacement in exile. It's a remarkably honest, raw naming of his isolation. Eliezer, on the other hand, means my God is help, encoding the retrospective testimony of divine rescue from Pharaoh. Taken together, these 2 names form a literal 2-volume theological autobiography of Moses' decades out there in Midian. But we really have to look at the harsh, historical reality of their legacy. Eliezer's line flourished quietly in complete obscurity as temple treasury administrators. But Gershom's line? Oh wow. His son, Jonathan, who is the grandson of Moses, actually became an apostate priest for an unauthorized idolatrous cult in the tribe of Dan. Scribes literally tried to alter the text later on just to protect Moses' reputation. But the shocking historical detail remains right there. A direct descendant of the ultimate lawgiver became a priest for a golden idol. And this brilliantly illustrates a really hard theological truth. The grace of God is not biologically inherited. Spiritual greatness, prophetic gifts, covenantal intimacy. You can't simply pass those down through genetics or a great family pedigree. The son of the prophet must seek the God of the prophet for himself, or that connection just doesn't happen. The succession of leadership ended up bypassing Moses' family entirely and went to Joshua, a man formed by proximity and the Spirit, not by his bloodline. Section 5. The Cost of Greatness. An incredibly heavy burden was distributed across this hidden household. Just think about it. You have a wife forced to execute a bloody covenant ritual entirely alone in the dark, a spouse dismissed and sent away during the very height of the mission, sons who grow up completely overshadowed by a father who essentially belongs to a whole nation, not just to them, and a mentor who gives his absolute best wisdom and then just departs. The families of world shapers bear incredibly heavy burdens. They pay a quiet, unnarrated price that tradition rarely stops to celebrate. Moses carried the weight of a nation, yes, but he did it at the expense of ordinary human availability to his own family. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Zipporah was close to greatness, but she wasn't the one at the burning bush. Yet, when the crucial moment demanded it, she didn't hesitate. She picked up a flint knife and did exactly what needed to be done, saving the entire mission. So if the calling of another does not exempt you from your own calling, and the greatness of someone else doesn't substitute for your own active faith, what flint will you pick up when your specific moment demands it? Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next one.